Hey, storyteller, imagine this. A reader grips your book in white-knuckled hands or holds her favorite e-reader in the same way. She can't turn the page fast enough, and yet she hesitates, holding her breath. What's going to happen on that next page? What causes this phenomenon? Suspense. Did you know that every story needs suspense? Whether you're writing horror or thrillers or mystery or sweet romance, cozy Christian fiction, or even stories for kids? Suspense makes readers ask questions, crave to know what happens next, and most important of all, keep turning pages. But how can you create or increase suspense if you aren't writing a thriller, mystery, horror, or crime drama? Welcome to this week's writer coaching session, where I will share 10 techniques to help you create suspense in your story, no matter the genre. Hi, I'm Bridget from B Squared Writer Coaching. I'm an author, editor, and your story coach, here to help you make your story powerful, polished, and publishable, so you can move readers and help them experience all the suspense in your story with maximum emotional impact. But first, I have a gift for you, just for visiting my channel. But you'll have to wait until the end to find out what it is. All I will tell you is this. You can use every technique I show you today to create suspense, but if you don't do this one thing, it won't work. What's that one thing? Well, the gift I have for you will help you accomplish it, so stick around to the end of the video to find out what that is. You'll also want to hang around to the end for this week's Power Up, a super practical action step you can use in your story right now. What is suspense, anyway? It is the tension the reader feels when wondering what will happen next, either in a single scene, a chapter, or throughout the story's arc. Someone once said, "Suspense is the cruel but fulfilling art of making readers wait." I apologize, I don't remember who said that. It was at a writer's conference I attended a long time ago. It just stuck with me. The cruel but fulfilling art of making readers wait. Creating suspense is easy. All you have to do is show the reader something they want, then threaten it. But when doing so, keep in mind the secret every good horror writer knows and uses well. The threat of the monster is much scarier than seeing the monster itself. Imagine any scary movie you've ever seen, any thriller. What's the scariest part? Is it when the monster jumps out of the shadows, or is it all that time that you see the shadow of the creature, or hear the footsteps, or feel it breathing down the back of your neck? Way scarier than when eventually the monster reveals itself. But suspense isn't always about bad guys and monsters. It can be the anticipation of the outcome of a contest, whether the guy will end up with the girl, whether and when a character will discover the secret to a riddle or some hidden truth about her past, or what happened to that star witness who vanished from the story. We'll go through the 10 techniques I have for you today sort of fast, so you may want to take notes. Now's a good time to pause the video and grab a notebook or your favorite app on your phone and get ready. I've grouped these techniques into 3 categories. All the tips in the first category revolve around establishing a threat in your story. Perhaps the most important technique to use in creating suspense is to provide high stakes. We create suspense by building anticipation for what is to come. So, hint at what's at stake for the protagonist long before he or she faces it, and keep dropping little hints throughout the story until that big event happens. When that event finally does occur, readers will be gripping your book in white-knuckled fingers, breathless to find out how the protagonist will handle the situation. Make sure the stakes of the story are clear, high, and personal. Not just for the protagonist, but also for the antagonist. And make sure that each of them have clear motivations. High stakes don't necessarily mean life and death. For your protagonist, the stakes might be the fulfillment of a dream. Maybe your protagonist is a runner and wants to win a particular race, has dreamt of doing so all her young life. For this protagonist, those stakes, the outcome of that contest, are quite high. The death of a dream can be super painful for most of us. Your antagonist also might not be evil. He might be simply the competition. He has the same dream, the same goal, but goes about achieving it in a different way from the protagonist. danger is probably the most obvious, but one of the greatest techniques we can use to create suspense in our stories. To do this, we raise the question in the reader's mind of whether a beloved character will survive or not. Show the intensity of what's at stake, then place your character in a level of danger that is appropriate to your story and your genre, and don't rescue him or her too soon to keep suspense building in the reader's mind. After all, we need to give that suspense a chance to grow. Keep in mind that you need to save the gravest danger for the climax, so don't spend it all too early, so to speak. The third technique we can use is something I call victory-defeat cycles. Give your protagonist losses on the heels of any wins they experience. This can come in two forms: a false victory. For example, the detective finally captures the suspect. That's a win, only to discover she's found the wrong person. And that would be a loss. The second is a victory that creates unexpected consequences. The protagonist heals the child, which is a win, but then is accused of witchcraft, a loss. An unexpected consequence of something that is good that the protagonist did. All the techniques in this next category relate to withholding information, either from the reader or from characters. Include mystery in your story. Like all humans, readers are curious beings. They can't stand not knowing the answer to something. If you raise a question, they will turn pages to find out what the answer to that question is. We don't like unknowns, so the more questions you raise with your story, the better. Just be careful not to confuse the reader. If you raise a question, you do need to answer it at some point. The best approach to this is to raise smaller questions that you answer along the way, but then those answers lead to more questions. Keep building that question-answer cycle. Of course, you'll have some bigger questions that won't be answered until the end or close to the end of the book, or perhaps even later in a series, but you do want to give your reader some satisfaction along the way while you keep raising those questions. Related to this technique is the trail of breadcrumbs. Drop little clues throughout the story. This can include anything from hints at which character may have committed a crime to revealing little bits of a character's mysterious past along the way. As a bonus, this technique is also an excellent way to incorporate backstory. The more you drop tiny and tantalizing hints along the way, the more readers will continue turning pages longing for the full story. Another fun technique you can use to withhold information from your characters is dramatic irony. When a reader knows or expects something your protagonist does not, we've created dramatic irony. Doing this raises the stakes and increases suspense in the mind of the reader, while your viewpoint character remains completely oblivious. Here are a couple of ways you can create dramatic irony. The point of view switch. If you're writing a story in a single point of view, this won't work. But if you're telling your story through multiple viewpoint characters, one may know something the other does not, especially if the other viewpoint character who isn't aware of whatever's going on is your protagonist. You can use the other character's point of view scenes to reveal the information that something dangerous is coming, or there's some secret that your protagonist doesn't know about, and this will build tension in the mind of the reader as to when or if your other character, the protagonist usually, will find out the information that you've revealed through someone else. Suspense increases the longer you delay letting the protagonist or the viewpoint character who's unaware of the information wait to find out, while the reader knows, and the other character whose viewpoint you used to reveal the information may know. The one who really needs the information doesn't, and so the reader is on the edge of her seat wondering, is she going to find out now, or will this secret cause harm before she discovers the truth? The second way we can create dramatic irony is through memory loss. You can do this by showing an intense action scene involving your main character, then in the next scene, reveal that the character has no memory of that event and is desperate to recall what happened, or perhaps someone's fate, her own or someone else's, depends on her remembering what she's forgotten. This can happen with stories of amnesia or traumatic memory loss of some other type, perhaps even induced memory loss. Someone caused the memory loss. There are lots of ways you can do this. In this type of scenario, not only is the character desperate to find out what she has forgotten, but the reader will be just as desperate to have her remember. And possibly there are things the reader doesn't know about what led to that exciting scene at the beginning of the story. So the reader knows what the protagonist doesn't, but there are still unanswered questions for the reader as well. And finally, you can use what is called a red herring. This is a type of foreshadowing often used in mysteries to lead readers to a false conclusion. It may take the form of a false clue or irrelevant topic introduced to distract or mislead the reader from the truth. For instance, clues may point to a certain suspect, or you've dropped information that indicates something will happen at a specific time or location. Then those clues are proven wrong at the very last instant, or the event the reader was expecting, and the character, by the way, is expecting the same thing, doesn't happen either at the time or at the location or in the way the reader and character expected. When this is used well, the reader will be surprised, often pleasantly, that the events or the information didn't turn out the way that they anticipated. This delights most readers if you've left little clues along the way. They will often reread a story in order to figure out where they got off track and what clues to the truth they missed. Are you finding this helpful? If so, be sure to click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss future writer coaching sessions. Now on to the third group of techniques for creating suspense. These all relate to anticipation and surprise. First, we have the what if twist. You can achieve this by pairing an ordinary or mundane task or event with something strange or dark that seems completely unrelated. Think of the most routine thing you can imagine, raking leaves, for instance, then twist it. What if your character is raking leaves and uncovers a trap door that she knows wasn't there before, or a dragon's egg, or the prongs of the rake get tangled in the bones of a skeleton? This doesn't have to be a horror story either. The unusual or strange thing could just be odd. It doesn't have to be evil or dark or the monster lurking in the woods kind of situation. The next technique is to make use of the element of time. Some call this the ticking time bomb plot device because, well, that's the perfect example. Time plays a huge role in building suspense. The shorter the time, the greater the suspense. We don't mean the time in which the story takes place, like a story that takes place in one day or a week or something. What this means is that you've placed a time limit or expiration date on something. You've shortened the time remaining to complete a task or before something bad happens. After all, how often have you held your breath while the character raced against a ticking timer to defuse a bomb? This is an example of placing a time limit on something bad that's about to happen. You can also do this by placing an expiration date on something the character wants or needs desperately. For example, if the character doesn't perform a task by a certain time, then yes, something bad could happen, but it also could mean the loss of the thing she wants most. Above all, make it absolutely clear that everything will be lost once that time elapses. You can further build suspense by allowing that time limit to expire and the protagonist doesn't achieve what needed to happen. So she has to suffer the consequences of that. Then that causes new problems and raises new questions. How will she go forward from here? What will she do now? How will she handle this bad situation that happened? Suspense is just as much about unpredictability as it is about anticipation. So keep your readers guessing. We might expect the character to succeed in defusing the bomb when the timer goes off, but maybe he has to run instead, and the bomb explodes despite his best efforts. Now what? This can really play into your character's psychology if he fails to achieve the goal or to save the people or whatever the timer was leading to. And as we said earlier, this doesn't have to involve the fate of the world. The stakes could be discovery or any number of things. Think of Cinderella. The fairy godmother gave her a time limit. She had only until midnight to stay at the ball, then the magic would wear off. Well, in at least some versions of Cinderella, she is running away, trying to escape the palace when midnight strikes, and on her way back home, her carriage, which was originally a pumpkin, turns back into a pumpkin, leaving her stranded, and she has to walk the rest of the way home in the rags that she was wearing originally all her torn clothing and everything instead of the beautiful ball gown. So now what? Will she get caught? Will her stepmother and stepsisters get home before she does? Because, I mean, after all, they have a nice carriage and horses. She's having to walk back. Will she be discovered? Will the prince ever find her? Lots of questions get raised here. I've mentioned this next technique in passing, but one of the greatest ways to create suspense is to use foreshadowing. We create foreshadowing when we hint at plot changes or events that may occur later in the story. I say may because not all foreshadowing comes to pass. We can also use imagery, an element of setting, or the general atmosphere to create foreshadowing. The directors of horror movies do this all the time, with either creepy music or sometimes the opposite of that, the happy, cheerful music that is played just a little too slowly, or it's a little too happy so it becomes creepy. It clues the reader in that something scary is about to happen. We can't use music in books or stories that we write, but there are other ways to create foreshadowing through atmosphere, through setting. You can use common tropes like a dark fog or a storm or a raven. Be careful you don't want to be cliched with these things, but there are parts of the setting you can use to foreshadow danger. Also, a line of dialogue, a specific object, or some kind of action can foreshadow something that is to come later. Well-written suspense hinges on anticipation, so foreshadowing is an excellent vehicle to build that anticipation. Keep in mind, though, if you promise the reader something through foreshadowing, keep that promise. Nothing disappoints a reader more than the anticipation of something that never gets fulfilled. Foreshadowing is also a great way to raise the stakes. If the character is going to encounter something specific later on, some kind of danger, for instance, it's a great idea to show either another character encountering that early in the story and suffering the consequences from it, or having the protagonist encounter something similar but on a much smaller scale early on. For example, if your character is going to face Medusa at the end of the story, and we know that the look in Medusa's eyes will turn someone to stone, have your character come across several statues that were once people earlier in the story. Or perhaps even someone that this character knew has been turned to stone, and we've run across that person's statue earlier in the story. So this hints that the character will eventually face Medusa. Are you ready for the secret gift I promised you? First, let's talk about today's power-up. In the scene you're working on, or at least a scene in your story, place a time limit on some task or event that needs to happen or the character needs to perform, an expiration date on something she wants or needs most, or a ticking timer until something bad happens. Or if you can't figure out a way to make this work for your story, then use one of the other techniques that we've covered in this video. There are, of course, many other ways to create suspense. These were just the top 10 that I could think of. But leave a comment and let me know other ways that you've found for creating suspense, either in your stories or that you've read in other books. Okay, I'll stop being mean and making you wait for your gift. Did my evil plan work, though? Did it increase your suspense along the way? Were you waiting to find out what the gift would be? You get bonus points if you can comment below and let me know which of the techniques for creating suspense I was using on you. Here's your gift, my real method for creating unforgettable characters. Suspense is a powerful tool for keeping readers engaged, but there is no suspense if the reader doesn't first care about the characters involved. This PDF will help you bring every character to life, make them three-dimensional in 4 easy steps without needing to create those in-depth, boring character biographies. Just click the link in the description or visit b2writercoaching.com/real. That's the letter B, the number 2, writercoaching.com/real, R-E-A-L. One of the best ways to make readers care about your protagonist is to give him or her a powerful character arc. Check back for next week's writer coaching session where we will talk about what character arcs are, and I'll show you the 3 different types you can create for your protagonist. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss it. As we've touched on today, conflicts and dilemmas are at the heart of what creates great suspense in our stories. For more on how to use conflicts and dilemmas in your story and how to create suspense-building scene endings, check out this video. And for more tips and the secret to writing an unputdownable story, check out this one. Until next time, Let's power up your storytelling.